There we go. I think we might get an echo, but we are live. I'm going to tweet about it too, just because for kicks and giggles. Do I have an echo?
I don't hear one.
I don't have an echo. Yay. Awesome. Well, I'm Sammy K. Powers. I'm joined by Ben Ramsey, Michelangelo Van Dam, Andreas Heigl, Raphael Doms, and Chris Bruck. And we are here for the third PHP test planning meeting. And this is, we're basically discussing the specifics of how a user group organizer can run a PHP TestFest event. Now I'm getting an echo now that we actually started talking. I don't know if you guys are gonna get an echo, but I guess Ben, do you wanna kick us off?
Sure. Yeah, make sure I can. Hold on, I'm closing out windows. Okay. So yeah, I wanted to have another planning meeting. The last one we had, we kind of talked about ways that we would possibly handle this with internals developers, and I think we've kind of gotten a good idea for the way things will work. I mean, I still have to draft that up and publish it out so that people can yeah, sounds good, or make recommendations for changes. So I'm running behind on that kind of stuff, but
we lost Ben. I think when you mute, it's going through your audio. Ben and Chris are in the same room. So
sorry. Where did you lose me?
You were just saying you were behind on the
right. So I'm going to try to write that up this week, and then post that to the Google group for review. So we're good there. I think that's going to kind of cover, how to submit your tests to be included in PHP TestFest, and also how the points and raffle and prizes will work. And Kairate, I'm butchering your name, I'm sorry, is currently talking to potential sponsors or our prize sponsors. So he's been talking to some groups about that. I think we're working pretty well there. So what I wanted to do with this session was to talk about ways that user groups can run their group or can structure a PHP TestFest event, and whether that's one time or multiple times, how that might look. And I know that some of the other people that we have on today have done this before in the past, so that's why I suggested everyone who's on here just to kind of give their share their experiences, what they've done before, and things that worked, maybe things that didn't work, and what other groups can do to have a successful time. So that's sort of setting the stage for what we're talking about today. And I mean, I guess I could start with by going around and kind of telling who you are. So for those who are watching and don't know who else on the call, and also maybe share a little bit about your experience with PHP TestFest in the past. And I'll go first, I guess, since I called the meeting. My name is Ben Ramsey. I am currently one of the organizers for the Nashville PHP user group. Nashville PHP has never participated in PHP TestFest that I know of. I've been organizing a group since 2010, but if they had done it before I joined, then I'm not familiar with what they've done in the past. However, when I was with Atlanta PHP years ago, we did run TestFest during, was it 2008 or 2009?
I started in 2008, and I think we had a small effort in 2009.
And Chris and I are in the same room, if you haven't seen that yet. That's why I'm turning my head to him. So Chris and I are both with Atlanta PHP, but I'll let him talk a little bit more in a minute. In fact, if you'd like to talk about what we did in the past, because you were there, I'll kick it over to you and you can share what Atlanta PHP did.
Gosh.
If I'm not putting you on the spot.
Oh, yeah, no, as you brought that up, I was like, man, what did we do? This was like 9 years ago. What happened? As I mentioned, I'm Chris Bruck. Took over leading Atlanta PHP from Ben in 2010. As we mentioned, we had, I think, our strongest effort in 2008, and I think we did a little bit in 2009, as I recall. Back then, I remember one of our members, Eric Stewart, was the global manager for building out a VM and getting source kind of pre-built and stuff like that for everybody. I'm trying to think of what else. It was kind of just organic. We worked with that. We had, I don't know, I think about 15, 20 people maybe in total. And I think as I recall, we just kind of tried to find areas that needed more coverage and just kind of dove in. I think we did some XML stuff. We had a couple, I think, tests that were actually submitted and accepted, I believe. I think we just had a lot of ramp up time just trying to get the VM running and stuff like that. So I think with maybe with the new Docker container and stuff going on, hopefully a little bit more streamlined this time around. So Ben, don't you think anything else? That's kind of what I remember. It's been a while.
I think we can get more into details of how it worked in a few minutes. But Andreas, you want to share about your group and what you're doing or what you've done in the past?
Well, I'm Andreas. I'm running the PHP user group in Frankfurt, and actually, I never actually attended a PHP TestFest yet. So this will be the first edition as well for me as also for the group. I'm looking forward to it, and well, I can't say more at the moment.
Okay. Michelangelo? We can't.
There's no audio. It worked at first before we pressed the live now button. But when we press the live now button, everything wants to break. It's okay, though. I'll try to lip read. He's saying, oh, crap.
I think we're hearing him, but maybe he's on a delay.
Is this better?
There we go.
There we go. Okay.
The magic button worked.
Yeah, well, this little thing doesn't work, but okay.
Fancy lapel.
So my name is Michelangelo van Dem. I'm president of PHP Benelux, a organization for PHP user groups in Belgium, Netherlands, and Luxembourg, which are very tiny countries in Europe. We participated in the 2009 PHP TestFest at first, and then again in 2012. The main problems that we had back then was everyone was on different platforms. Most of them were Windows or Mac OSs, and we spent the majority of our time trying to get the systems up and running. And yeah, that was a lot of waste of time in order to actually spend on making PHP code coverage better. Yeah, the lessons that we learned in 2009 was providing virtual machines and other infrastructures. Like we also had a hoster combo that was providing a test server where we can actually run the PHP tests on, which helped us a lot in 2012. But yeah, again, the majority of problems we had was getting things set up and get everyone going to participate in the event. So that was it.
All right. Ooh.
What is going on? That's why I have headphones. What's going on?
Sorry.
Was that you, Chris?
No, I unmuted mine. And
oh, okay.
yeah, I didn't think that was going to happen. Sorry.
It's okay.
When Chris has to jet, it will fix itself when I unmute mine. All right, Raphael.
Oh, cool. Yeah, so I'm Raphael Doms, running the Amsterdam PHP user group in Amsterdam. And in 2009, I used to run PHP São Paulo back in Brazil, and then we participated. It was one hell of an event. We were a small group. I think we had, roughly 10, 12, maybe 15 people at most. We had a little bit of a ramp up issue at the beginning. We spent basically the entire morning divided in two groups, myself and Guilherme Blanco, trying to figure out how to actually write a test, because we had never done that for PHP internals, which was great. While the rest of the group got, the repository checked out and especially running the VMs and everything they needed to do that for. I think back then we didn't even use VMs; we were just running it locally. Because already both me and Guilherme already had everything checked out, so we focused on making sure we could guide people afterwards. That actually worked out pretty well. After we came back from lunch, we essentially walked everyone through the two tests we had written as a test in the morning, and everyone was already ready by that time. And then we started cranking out tests like nobody's business, which was pretty cool. And we actually saw a big pickup after the event. People kept writing tests at home after the event finished. So while we had one physical event, the entire TestFest for us was more of a 2-month ordeal where people just kept submitting, which I think we ended up, last time I checked, with like 171 tests, which was a very, very successful from our point of view, and it really worked out. Back then we had a presentation from Sebastian Bergman about PHP, and that's essentially what we used to be able to kick off that process and actually know what the hell we're doing. And one of the areas we had a lot of work with was mostly the figuring out what to test, right? What needed coverage, what didn't have coverage, what does this line in C actually mean in terms of writing a test for it. Once we had a good pattern, back then we had a really low coverage in terms of PHP internals. So it was easy to spot, okay, there's all of these image functions that need testing. Nowadays, that's a bit harder because there's a lot more code coverage, so the tests are a lot more specialized. I think that's going to be an interesting challenge for this year.
Yep.
That's probably going to be the biggest one, the biggest challenge.
And Sammy, are you working with a group right now?
Did you say for me?
Yes. Are you working with the user group right now?
Yeah. I'm a co-organizer of the Chicago PHP user group, and although we've never officially participated in TestFest before, I did hold a basically mini TestFest event that happened a couple years ago, and I do remember there being a lot of setup time. I kind of expected kind of like what Michelangelo Van Dam was experiencing, like spending all the time on setup. But it worked out okay because I tried to send a message beforehand saying, hey, download this and get this to kind of get a head start. So the people that had done that, like I kind of like, they were kind of on the fast track, but also had like the slow track to get everybody else up to speed. And then there was also a bunch of people who just came to watch and just kind of were interested in the process and didn't really want to participate, like with their computers. So I would say, I don't know if it was necessarily successful or not, but like it at least educated people. I am curious though, because it seems like Raphael had the most successful setup for running a test fest when having people continue to write tests even after the event is over. Maybe just trying to figure out how to wrap up the implementation details of how he implemented that and just make that part of TestFest 2017. But also we need to address the other issue that he brought up about it's not just about the test coverage anymore. It's about really niche, hard to test things. It's not easy anymore.
Right. Yeah, let's hold off on talking about how to pick out what to test kind of towards the end. I guess I'm interested in hearing how everyone thinks, or what everyone thinks would be like a great way to kind of kick things off. I know that several groups have already started kicking off PHP TestFest. Granted, with less information than I would love to have ready for them, so that's my fault. But what is your kind of take on an ideal situation in introducing people to TestFest and kicking it off? Do you do that all at one meeting, or do you spread that out? What are you planning on doing, and what has worked in the past?
Go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, one of the things that we saw was, for instance, the session that Sammy gave at PHP Tech earlier this year, where he was presenting with very simple examples about how to get started with testing and how to get involved in the whole PHP test continuum. And I think that the presentations that Sammy provided are really attractive for new folks into the PHP community, but also for more veteran PHP developers. So I think that having a presentation in the similar style that Sammy gave would definitely help getting everyone excited to participate, as we also saw during Tech that everyone was still working on it, especially because he was giving away elephants. That might have done the trick, but yeah, it is something that I think that with a good presentation, with a lot of motivation and passion, yeah, people can participate. And if we have a couple of people with the user groups that already have participated in a earlier event, makes the whole experience a whole lot easier. For the people that are working by themselves or in an office, yeah, I think that they should have like direct lines with people from their community that they know that can help them, because my apologies, because I think that if we have a couple of people being able to be like the on-site manager or mentor in this whole experience, that PHP TestFest 2017 will be a wonderful experience for everyone who is participating, either in a user group or alone in the office, or working with a team at a company. But yeah, it requires a little bit of yeah, setup and arrangements. If people want to participate with their company, they should reach out and find someone that can be the mentor for them. Those kind of things.
Yeah, I think for Amsterdam PHP, we were trying to organize a group event for the whole Netherlands, but that turned out that the logistics were just a little bit complicated. So we're gonna probably try and roll out our own solo event, and see if we can gather people. I mean, Amsterdam is pretty central, so if we manage to get a good venue, we can basically try and host as many people as possible, and contribute to whatever other groups are going around. But I think in terms of in terms of structure, I want to follow the same structure we had in Sao Paulo, right? Spend the morning doing a presentation, showing people, okay, this is how you set up, this is what you need. I think with all the Docker stuff that the group in Brazil has done, that's going to be like a lot easier than it was back in 2009. So that's some pretty good work that went in there. So that will help the setup. The next step is, okay, what do you have to do? And I think that's where all the material that Ben is making available is really going to help. I think we should have a presentation like Sammy's, even though I didn't see it. I heard good things about it. But again, it's what Sebastian did back in 2009. We just need something to walk them through. Like, why are we doing this? How do you do it? What are the sections of a PHP test? How do you write it? And then we get again to the most important part of all, which is helping people identify an area that they can then focus on and start writing tests for, and then spend the rest of the day kind of walking people through, showing them a couple of tests, and getting people to start writing their own tests. With the structure that Ben has put forward, I think it's easy enough for people to continue doing that at home, through Google Groups or through their own user groups. So Amsterdam, I don't think we're going to set up anything special for that communication other than the channels we already have, IRC, or maybe the Google Groups for the TestFest itself. But then try to promote that people keep going. right? Because that's the cool part. I mean, it kind of bites you after you get into it. It's like something fun to do when you see the results of what you're doing. And I think if we just keep that spirit, what I think, and I'm still looking at the details if we can do this, if we have enough resources to try and do it, is then try and do a wrap-up event closer to the end of the test fest, gather everyone together again, look at all the tests that we have achieved as a group in Amsterdam, and then as a test fest in general, kind of like celebrate that end moment, but also make it a nice wrap-up moment, and then send the message of, hey, well, you've done this year, carry on after the test fest, but I would like to try and like bracket the entire event from an opening to an official closing kind of ceremony as well. So.
Okay. Anyone else have anything they want to offer on like how you're planning on running the group?
Yeah, we're planning just a 3-hour event to get people started. So we are planning on doing an introduction beforehand, trying to get everyone to set up all the things on their machines so they can bring up the machines to the event. Have a short introduction to how to write a test, why to write tests, etc., and stuff like that, and to decide what kind of test we want to write, and then try to guide people for 2 hours, 3 hours, something like that, through writing 1 or 2 tests, contribute them, and then to see that they can write and will write further tests during the next couple of weeks. That's more or less the idea we have. Let's see how that works out.
Okay.
No, nothing that sounds different than what others have said so far. Just kind of a.
I think what we're planning on doing in Nashville is, I mean, it's not a whole lot different than what everyone else is talking about. We were going to dedicate one of our regular meetings to just introducing TestFest, our PHP TestFest, and talk about what PHP tests are, and then maybe have a follow-up 3-hour time. We'll have to find a place to do that. We have not yet found a place where we can set up, a longer period of time, and that where everyone can bring laptops and have tables and that kind of stuff to work on. So that's something we're still in the process of figuring out, but we do want to have more of that workshop style. So we will probably have like our intro meeting to get people interested, to let them know what to expect, and then we'll have a follow-up workshop to work together and write tests.
I feel like that's the same format we'd end up doing as well. Just kind of ideally get kind of a preliminary setup session, maybe not even the same day, and then everybody ready to walk in with working systems and just off to the races at that point.
All right, so I know that we've all been talking about a little bit, not all of us, but we've all mentioned this Docker PHP. I think it's called Docker PHP QA. What's the name of it? I don't have it right here. Let me grab it. Link to it. It is, yes, Docker PHP QA, and this is done as Rafael was saying, from the a few of the people in the Brazil group have put this together, and I'm trying to find a link to the GitHub repository. Yes, it is github.com/herdphp, HERDPHP/Docker-PHP-QA. And I'm going to drop a link here in our chat, and Sammy can maybe post that along with the video once it's been published. But we haven't really settled on like an official, more or less, way of doing things with your user group. But this is going to streamline the process for everyone. And I think it works really well. And in fact, they've already got a list of links to blog posts and talks. They have a link to Sammy's slides on SpeakerDeck from the PHP talk that the PHP Tech talk that we've been talking about. This is the reason it's going to streamline everything is you could just write. You don't have to know how to build PHP with this. You would be able to, as long as you have Docker installed, and Docker is readily available on most platforms nowadays. You would be able to write a single PHP test, anywhere on your machine, and then use this tool to run it, at least to test it, or to test your test. So I think this is kind of the tool that I would like to encourage people to use. I think that it's going to help us get over that initial hurdle of, as Chris was saying, with Atlanta PHP, we had, I remember our meeting, and Eric Stewart put a lot of time into creating that virtual machine. In fact, it's still online somewhere. The links that are on the PHP wiki to it are still active. So you can find it if you want, but it used VirtualBox. I think it was just a VirtualBox, like the whole VM contained together before we had Vagrant and those kinds of tools available. You could download the whole box and run it. And I guess the problems we encountered were people who couldn't get VirtualBox set up properly. There were people who were having issues with just running the VM. And I think it took us a good 2 hours or more. Like, some people I don't think ever got set up.
Yeah, I think that was part of the case, and no fault of Eric at all. It was just a lot of little moving parts to get it going, and we had a wide range of experience level as well. So a lot of people were just completely brand new and weren't familiar with VirtualBox and the add-ons and all the things it needed to work smoothly. So
yeah, I think Docker PHP QA is going to be a good resource here. Are there any other tools that anyone else is planning on using in addition to this?
We'll use that in Sammy's slides. Sammy's slides.
Sammy's slides. Okay. Very good. All right. Let's see. What else do I have? I think that, unless is there anything else that anyone wants to bring up regarding just like the format of the meeting and how you're planning on structuring it that's any different from what anyone's talked about? All right. So let's move to what we can test, because that's the bigger thing that is going to be harder to figure out. I'm going to kind of lean on Sammy to help with this a little bit, since Sammy knows a little bit more about what's testable and what's not. In the past, what has been done was that a list of areas that were in great need of tests were listed up on the wiki somewhere, and groups kind of claimed areas. If I'm remembering this correctly, I think this is what we did. If not, speak up and let me know that it was done a different way. But I think that groups were claiming specific sections of code or sections of functions or object classes in PHP to test. And a group would put their name next to that on the wiki, and then people in that group would try to test areas. Now, as Raphael mentioned, our code coverage is greatly improved. So the goals of PHP TestFest are a little different than originally. The goals now are really more along the lines of introducing people to PHP tests, and how they can contribute to core in ways that don't require you to know any C. So this is really kind of introducing a new generation, for lack of a better phrase, of developers to PHP core contributions. In addition to that, we want to improve the tests that we have. Some of the tests do test things and they cover lines of code, but they're not necessarily comprehensive. So we want to be able to do that. And in writing good tests, sometimes a test should reveal a bug that's in the core that we did not know about, even if those lines are showing up as green in the code coverage reports. So there's different things we kind of want to look at when writing tests. So it may be worthwhile to look at some existing tests and figure out what exactly is being tested, and then whether or not you can improve those tests by writing another one that further tests another mutation or something. Sammy, thoughts on that? Like, how can people figure that out?
Yeah, I don't. Oh, sorry, goodness. Serious echo.
I don't have my.
Nothing's on his end.
No, sorry, I got to mute you for a second. Okay, there we go. Yeah, so that's actually going to be the biggest $1 million question is what to test. And you did hit on it, like discovering bugs sometimes, like when you're trying to test these edge cases and you're going through the code. The problem is that it just requires going through and looking at the gcov.php.net website and digging into the C code to actually see what lines are covered and whatnot. And the people who are like really afraid of C are just like one of the selling points of the PHP test is like, oh, you don't need to know C, but actually all the low-hanging fruit's gone, so you kind of do need to know C. I mean, at least it's easy. Like, we need to kind of make it easy for them to be like, or encourage them to be like, it is C. It's like a different foreign thing, and there's lots of macros which we don't understand. There is this foreign concept, but you can at least see there's some blue and there's some red. See if you can do some poking around and figure out if you can turn them into red to blue. So the biggest thing will be really educating them on what Zim parse parameters is and why you shouldn't be writing tests for Zim parse parameters, and we shouldn't write error cases for like testing that the function accepts this parameter or not. And I kind of, like with my screencast series, I'm kind of like kicking myself a little bit for showing that as an example, because now people are going to think, oh, I'll just go through and just write all these tests for Zim parse parameters. But I was just using it as an example. It's not like a real functional test, and I didn't make that clear. But so I really want to have a follow-up video that talks about that, but also writing tests for bugs, like going into bugs.php.net, finding a bug that you can replicate, and then making a test for it. And then marking it as X-fail, so expected fail, because there's not a patch for it yet. So if you can't make a patch, at least you can send a pull request and be like, hey, as soon as somebody fixes this test will pass. And then another thing that I was doing recently is that I ran the entire test suite on my local machine. The entire thing, it took a while because they're all running serial, but there's a bunch of tests that fail at the end. And you can just go through the summary and see, look at the output and like, why did each one of these tests fail? Some of them are failing because they're not good. They assume certain things about the output. Like if you're on, like you're running them on Ubuntu, for example, I ran them on my Mac and it had like a different path to a temporary directory. So the test failed. So we need to go in there and like fix the test because it was broken. And then, so if that happens, I don't know how we're going to plan on tracking that if they're not submitting it directly to PHP source repo. But I guess that's another topic to explain. But like these are sort of the things to. I will make the summary video that kind of puts all these ideas together, and like not just adding new tests, but also fixing existing one. And here's how you can look for specific error cases that are actually helpful, not just testing for arguments. So I guess I'm going to throw this out there. Do we want to make like this package wrapped up video or tutorial or something that we just hand to a user group admin and said, here's X, Y, and Z, like outline it, like how you can run the event. You're going to need 3 hours. You're going to need this. You're going to need that. And maybe even have like slides that are like, I know it's going like, this is requiring a lot of work from whoever wants to volunteer to do this, but like having slides that you can just be like, here's the slides and you can copy and paste whatever you want from it, or like what, maybe I'm I'm taking it to another topic here, but any thoughts on that?
I was actually thinking before we move on to that, Sammy, with the finding of the test, I'm still like, that's going to be like one of the real big challenges. Is it worth trying to set up a council of elders who can identify things to, figure out like things we can try and look into, or like specifics, or at least like guide this overall line where people can start following? Even if it's not like this individual test or that individual test, but like, hey, these are the things with maybe patterns to look for. Because the thing is, if we're selling this to people who are going to be new to testing and specifically new to C, telling them to, well, just compare this line of C with this information we have here and it'll be fine. People are going to be like, yeah, that sounds perfect. I'm going to run away to the bathroom and not come back again, right? So if maybe we get a group who can do that work of aligning this idea with this CLI and saying, okay, we need to test this, or maybe this bug needs to be tested, or these tests are not good, or whatever. Maybe if we put together some of that material that just keeps going, we can have the same idea of people then tagging and say, oh, I'll pick this up, I'll do that, and then just at least get a better idea, some examples of what can be done.
I like it.
I also have a few questions though. Back in 2009 and 2012, we used Subversion as our source control management, and I remember that every user group had their own branch, and you had a mentor in the room that was collecting all the tests and merging them into that branch, and then send it out to the QA team of PHP. Now in the Git world, things will be a little bit different. What I understood was that every user group, every company, every individual will have its own branch or its own version of the repo, and then we'll push pull requests to the QA team based on their branches, or how's it? How are you visioning this?
Yeah, the way I'm envisioning that is I've actually created a separate repository that uses PHP source as its base. It's actually not forked from it just because of some issues I was having where even despite having a different name, I couldn't fork this one to myself because I had already forked PHP source. So anyway, that's just a technicality, but I've set up this separate repository where I've also created branches for branches that kind of track against the same mainline branches with these names. So they're named PHP TestFest -2017-master PHP 7.0, 7.1, 7.2. And the idea is for brand new tests that, so the way this would work in my head, and this is what I'm writing out right now and trying to get done this week, get the instructions written out so that people can review it and say this sounds great, or this should change this way. The idea is that people would fork this repo, write their tests, and then submit for brand new tests that aren't against any bugs in PHP. They would submit their PHPT pull request against the master one. And it would just be a pull request, and then there would be reviewers who can review each of these pull requests. And if they are writing a test that is supposed to fix a bug in a specific version of PHP, then they would make that pull request against that version branch. And so the reviewers, again, are going to review these. And then what we discussed on our last planning meeting was that Sarah said that what they could do then is take all of those, kind of merge them in or rebase them in, and then submit one big pull request from that branch or from that repo into the main upstream repository. And at that point, like, everyone's commits kind of are, they've got their name and authorship all associated with them, and then she's able to take them and put them where they need to go.
Is that going to happen all at once, like in January?
That would happen. It could happen really anytime, but I think it would happen. It could happen all at once. I don't know. I don't actually know when that would happen. But for the purposes of PHP TestFest and tracking those, what I'm planning on doing, and I'm in the middle of doing it, is writing an app that lets you log in with GitHub and then shows you kind of your pull requests that you've submitted to this repo. And so you can kind of look at all your pull requests that you've submitted. You would be able to also associate your account with a user group. And then the reviewers would be able to use this same tool to I guess, tally points, or maybe we would use labels on the pull request to add points, and then this tool would kind of calculate those points up. So that's kind of what I'm thinking right now, trying to keep it simple, very low barrier to entry, so you don't have to set up a new account somewhere. You just go click authorize with your GitHub account, and then it would show you all the pull requests you've already submitted. You don't really have to do a lot other than associate yourself to a user group. And I think that would be at a high level kind of the way that the process would work. And that's why last week I saw some people kind of contribute some pull requests already to PHP source, and I said, oh, hold on, wait till we have the plan out for how we're going to keep track of these things, because if you submit a bunch of pull requests to PHP source, there's not a good way to track them. And I know that in the past, as Michelangelo, you were talking about the Subversion. Actually, was it Subversion, or were they doing CVS? I know that
in 2009 they were already on Subversion,
okay.
but the CVS merge to Subversion was around that. Well, no, it was earlier. It was like 2005, 2006.
I don't remember.
A long time ago.
But at any rate, yes, there were different branches, for whatever that term meant, in Subversion, different folders for each of those user groups. But I don't think we have to manage it that way now, because everyone can kind of maintain their own fork. If a user group really wanted to have a separate complete branch and then some one pull request, they could, but that would make it really hard to track each individual person, I think. So the idea here is that we want to track each individual person and make sure that each pull request has at most one test in it. And then your reviewers can actually make comments on each one of those too. So if someone submits something that has multiple tests, they could say, hey, please break this up into multiple pull requests, and we'll be happy to review it. That way, there can be a little bit of back and forth, and they can improve the test. If a reviewer thinks it's a worthwhile test, and they want them to get credit for it, they can actually make a comment and add a review, and the person can actually update it.
So basically, what you're saying, commit often.
Yeah, I think it would be great. Like anyone can commit, open as many pull requests as they want against this. In fact, while I haven't really, I haven't written up these instructions, anyone, if you're listening to this, you could go ahead and open those pull requests against this repo, and the tracking stuff that I'm writing should still work once I get it going. But if you also want to hold off, that'd be fine too. But don't let that stop you from writing the test. You can go ahead and write all the tests you want, and then just open the pull request when all the stuff is in place.
Just
I
for
think the challenge is still need to have a clear distinction between which user group is doing what.
Yeah, this doesn't answer that. So, Raphael, you had been discussing that, and Chris was leaving the room at the time, so I didn't catch everything you said. Can you recap what you were saying?
Yeah, I was saying that it might be interesting if we gather some of the people from core, like Sarah, who was here before, and kind of like establish a council of elders who can say, okay, well, these are the things we have identified that might be a good guide, or at least, well, Sarah already had some idea of patterns. Maybe we can gather some people who are more familiar with C to actually say, okay, I'm just going to go dive into the C code, look into GCOV, identify these areas based on the patterns that Sarah gave us, and just make a list. Okay, I've seen that these things need to be better. So if whoever is writing the test is not familiar with C, someone already did the kind of connecting the dots of that, of connecting the C lines with what needs to be tested, to at least establish a good line of like low-hanging fruit. And then, you know, once they start looking at two things and connecting the dots, then I see people usually pick up. It's not that hard. But especially for those first tests, if we had like a good list of low-hanging fruit, that's probably going to help those people who are beginning.
I love that.
Yeah, and then maybe have that council also go for like broad strokes. Like, okay, we've seen that this whole thing here, these tests are horrible, or the ideas that Sammy gave, I think they're all good. But kind of just concentrate and maybe have a continuous flow of someone who's actually going into core and finding things and just has, oh, I found this interesting thing. They have somewhere where they can just quickly write that up, and then someone can see it and then pick it up.
Okay. I just opened an issue on the PHP TestFest.org repo that the title is right, a tutorial for how to find areas of PHP to test, but I added a note to that about working with core developers to help identify areas that we can put into a list.
And maybe on the repo that everybody's submitting to, they're submitting the test PRs to, we just have the issues be those pointing out like, hey, here I found something that needs to be covered. Literally, it could just be a screenshot of the line in red, a link to the line in GitHub, and maybe even the PHP code that would cover that line to make it even lower hanging fruit. To where it's like, hey, just turn that into a test and submit it, and magical things happen.
Actually, yeah, that's a really good idea. Let me turn on the issues for that other repo.
You had the issues turned off?
Well,
no, I just one other thing that I think might be interesting. You mentioned the feedback loop once the person has submitted the test, and maybe whoever is merging it and reviewing it has some feedback. There's also a probability of people just dropping out, so we should have some kind of like, you know, be ready to kind of pick up tests that have been abandoned that, you know, don't never get revisited again. So it just might be good to keep that in mind. I know I'm very pessimistic.
Oh, that's good. Just heads up, we probably need to wrap up here in about like 10 minutes or so. Just for everybody who's got stuff afterwards.
Yeah, like sleeping.
Like sleeping.
What time is it over there?
11:45.
Nice. You're a trooper. Michelangelo's pretty late there too, I guess.
Yeah, same area. 11:45. But I still have to have my dinner, so.
Central European summertime right now.
It's the same time zone, but you know, I only see Michelangelo online.
But it's still bright outside, right?
Nope.
No, not anymore.
Not anymore. It wasn't until like 10:30 though.
Whatever they call summer here is over.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
It gets dark around 8:30, 9-ish.
Okay.
Yeah, 9-ish now. Yeah.
All right. Oh, that's right. It's September. It's not June anymore. Okay.
Good morning, Ben. How are you?
I don't know when it is. I never do. Okay. This is all great stuff, though. I'm putting this all on this one ticket or this one issue, hoping that, you know, we can get some help in that respect. We should all ask around I'll talk to Sarah about helping out with this, but we should try to find some other core developers who'd like to help out. Okay.
Absolutely. I think Joe Watkins would probably be interested in helping out as well. I know he's expressed some interest, especially because he doesn't want to go there and manage close all the issues that are testing XenParse parameters. So
right. Andreas, we can't hear you.
Can't hear. Oh,
he's not muted. I don't know what's going on. Interesting. Technology.
Did you try turning it off and on again? Can you do sign language?
Oh man. There we go.
Does it now?
Yes.
Yay.
Yay! Turning it off and on again. One thing that Sammy recently said was triggering me. Perhaps another thing or another idea to get something to write a test about would actually really be looking in the bug tracker and trying to verify stuff. We perhaps should add that as well to the repo as idea, because I think that eliminates all the whole stuff about knowing something about. You just have to try to well, get the bug running within the test, and if you mark it as X fail, it is okay if it fails. So if someone fixes that, we get a notification because now the test actually failed. Is that correct, Sammy?
Yeah, so if it passes when it's marked as X fail, it's going to fail, I believe, if I remember correctly off the top of my head. So that way we will know once they fix the bug, we have a failed test, and we have to change it from X fail to pass.
Exactly, but we have something that we actually can then use to verify, yeah, now the test is, the bug is fixed.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, great. So that would be another option as well. I think I'm thinking about using actually that pattern to get people to into writing tests, because that also introduces them to the bug tracker of PHP, and that can need some love.
Yeah, apparently there was somebody that would go and triage bugs left and right. I can't remember what their name was, but they don't do that anymore. So now the bug tracker's like piling up. So it'd be good to get some bugs triaged and tests written for them.
Sadly, there's no way to tag a bug on the tracker as if like this has a test, this doesn't have a test.
You could leave a comment on the tracker and say there's a test for it here.
Yeah, but it would be easier to filter. Okay, give me all the bugs that don't have tests.
Oh, right. Yes. Yes.
That's
not a bad idea.
I mean, we might be able to correlate the file name with the bugs and kind of do some smart parsing.
I think in the some of the test file names are have the bug number inside them, so that might be a possibility.
If they're written for bugs, then they should have bug title in the file name. I think if we just parse through all the files on GitHub and then I'll give us some idea of what's covered.
Love it. 5-minute warning.
All right. I'm taking notes. Okay. So I think we've got some good ideas here on what we want to do to try to help find these areas to test. And I think that the xfail thing is a great idea. I'd completely forgotten about that. So that's great. Anything else?
Just one thing. I think, let's see, Michelangelo, you're on your way to Pacific Northwest PHP, right?
Yeah.
Anybody else?
In about 12 hours.
Okay, cool. You have a little bit more traveling to do than I do. But I will also be there, and maybe I've got some time blocked off just to maybe if we want to do any action items or anything, maybe we can just do it there, and whoever else wants to get involved. So just putting that out there.
I was thinking if you are there and I'm there, maybe we can already see the ideas of Ben to see how that works when working as a group sort of thing.
Like a test for the TestFest.
We can, we do test-driven TestFest.
It's not a bad idea.
I mean, I'm leaving tomorrow. I will be arriving tomorrow evening around 8 Pacific time. So that will be like 24 something hours later from my time. But I will be there, and then when you arrive, we can look at things and get things sorted out. What do you say?
Sounds good.
Awesome.
Yeah, and I won't be there, but just ping me if you have questions. I'd love to hear feedback on that and get some thoughts on what you guys encounter or uncover. All right, well, I'm going to make some notes on some issues here. I'm going to add more issues to the phptestfest.org issue tracker. I'm going to try to encourage, make some blasts on Twitter to encourage some other people to help come, throw some content in there to, contribute ideas. And I will follow up with Sarah and Joe to talk about ideas for like trying to amass a list of areas to test and maybe even, make issues on this other PHP source, the PHP TestFest PHP source repo. Is there anything else we want to kind of close out here with regarding, managing a PHP TestFest event with the user groups?
No, I mean, other than just trying to give them like a packet that's easy to just figure out, I guess is just the only thing. But
we need to put all that together. I think
that's the only thing.
Other than that, have fun.
Yeah.
That was a part of it, right?
Actually, maybe in closing here, Raphael, can you talk a little bit about how, I know that you're with Sao Paulo, you had a small group to begin with, but they seemed very kind of energized around it. So what are some things that you did with the group to get them so excited around producing so many tests for the first Test Fest?
To be fair, we didn't really do much. It wasn't really in the plan to get people to keep going. But we just had fun on that one day, and then people started realizing, oh my God, I'm actually contributing to the language in a really, a really active way, in a really important way. Back then it was easy, right? We were testing the Zen par stuff, so that was the easy part of all this. So you could like churn out test after test just by going through those things. So it was a quick payoff for the investment you had. And I know, like, I myself, I went crazy. I just got home and like, I've got nothing to do. I'm gonna write 50 tests, which I ended up doing. So it was accidental, right? It was more like people realizing that they PHP tests are like pretty simple and cool. So it's a nice way to just get used to like finding the testing groove there. And realizing that it's a low barrier to actually contribute to PHP, and I think there's a lot of people who want to contribute to PHP that just don't know how to. And I think like docs and tests are like the easy thing, right? And you get your name up there, and that feeling is good. But we didn't really do anything specific to incentivize that. I think if I revisit that this year, I want to make sure that the material is out there, which I think is a great job that you're already doing. Making sure that everyone who is at the opening event, we walk them through the first steps and get them started. And just show them, look, hey, we're going to keep going, which means we keep the conversation alive on GitHub. We keep the conversation alive on the PRs. And I think, to be fair, one of the things that really helped was actually the competition, because we had Michelangelo's group right on our tail writing tests, and we're like, you know what? Not this time. We will beat them. And I think, maybe that friendly competition also really helped. And I know the prizes were also a big incentive for everyone. Like, this is a community that was far away from the core and the center of the community. So these were some of the very first elephants and mugs and things that actually made it to Brazil, were the people who were, part of that test fest. So I think that also helped, really helped motivate that, right?
Cool. And real quick, Ken Guess messaged me on Twitter because he's been watching live and says maybe peeps could also use their time reviewing what to test, also figuring out what needs to be documented. And I think we did bring that up in the last one, and that would be awesome. It's probably not going to be like one of the goals of TestFest, but if they want to dig deeper, yes, definitely add documentation. Maybe we could just add that as like a side note somewhere. But we do need to wrap it up. Sorry.
Yeah, I think that I think I'm good here. That's everything that I wanted to hit on and talk about. Is there anything else anyone wants to share before we go? All right. Thank you so much, Sammy, for putting this together.
My pleasure.
Definitely very appreciative of that.
Thank you, sir, for organizing all this.
Yeah, Ben, super.
And also, for anyone watching, PHP Architect just put out their September issue, and the community corner in it, James Titcomb has a article on PHP TestFest. Check it out.
Nice.
Absolutely. Well, thanks for joining us, everyone. I think it's time to officially click the not broadcast anymore button, which actually just says stop broadcast. We'll see you in the next PHP TestFest planning episode or in real life. Bye.
Bye.
Cheers.